folks, welcome to Psycho Schizo Espresso with me, Dr. Kevin Dutton, and Bruce Dickinson, and welcome back to those who joined us for episode 1, because this episode is in fact part 2 of that episode, in which we're continuing to talk to Professor Steve Friesen, Professor of Biblical Studies at the University of Texas at Austin, about the number of the beast and all things eschatological.
Eschatology. What did we say it was?
I've been reliably informed during the previous week that eschatology refers to a branch of theology which is concerned with the end of the world, as opposed to scatology, which is the science of the study of shit, really, I suppose. Not to be confused with that. This is certainly not a load of shit.
Yeah.
So, shall we continue having a chat to Steve about things eschatological?
He has got so much to say about the cult of the apocalypse. And in case you thought it was just a one-time thing, it's been going on for a long time, and it's never yet happened.
The Seventh Day Adventists, I've read as well. I mean, this comes into this idea you can make this number, you know, depending on what your agenda might be, you can kind of make it fit anything. And the Seventh Day Adventists, I've read, have got this, they kind of got it in a little bit for the Catholic Church, I think, because they've got this phrase, vicarius filii Dei, I think that's right, vicar of the Son of God, which they claim is one of the official titles of the Pope, although that's disputed. And they say that actually, if you do the numerological treatment on that adds up to 666 as well. So, from a psychological perspective, I'm kind of interested in, like, well, depending on what your agenda is, if you kind of get the right phrase and the right combination of letters, you can kind of tweak it a little bit so it adds up to this number. It's almost like, you know, working backwards to make things fit.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's working backwards. It's to make it fit. It's retrofitting the text to meet the way you see the world shaping up. Now, that use of 666 against the Pope and against the Catholic Church is an old Protestant Christian tradition that's been going on for a long time. Protestants, as separating themselves from the Catholic Church, have promoted the view that Revelation is actually talking about their opponents, Catholicism. And so there's a long history of that, using it that way. But let's see, you know, there was John F. Kennedy, President Kennedy, aroused a lot of suspicions. Not only was he Catholic, but when he won the Democratic nomination, the number of votes he received were 666. Coincidence? I don't think so. And Ronald Reagan, just to be bipartisan, Ronald Wilson Reagan, 6 letters in each one of his names, 666. Coincidence? I don't think so.
There's another story about Ronald Reagan, actually, Steve, you might know. I think it was 1989. Him and Nancy moved into Bel Air, which is a district of Los Angeles, as you know. And their address, their house, I don't know if you know this, was 666 St. Cloud Avenue. And actually, Ronald Reagan got really spooked by this and actually had the address changed to 668 St. Cloud Avenue.
Yep.
You know, I'm getting convinced by Ronald Reagan now. There's too many coincidences. You got me convinced.
Do you also believe he was a replicant in that case? That in actual fact he just hangs his lizard skin up and goes and lies under a heat lamp before.
No, you're just being
sorry.
That
was Bill.
Silly.
That was Bill Clinton.
You're just being
I'm sorry.
silly, Bruce.
I'm sorry. I draw the line at 7-headed beasts. That's it.
What is it with the number 7? Because obviously there's this symbolism that 7 is a sacred number, and so or allegedly is a sacred number. And I'm intrigued as to why and whether or not there's any relationship between 6 and 7, or they just happen. 6 to 6 just happens to be a one-off designed by St. John the Divine to go, yeah, here's a little hidden Easter egg in my message here. It's Nero and Caesar, they're assholes, but I can't really say that because they'd chop my hands off. So here's a little Easter egg for you folks who understand. People who do crosswords, will get it.
Numbers play a big role in the symbols in Revelation and apocalyptic symbolism in general. The important numbers in Revelation tend to be 7, 10, 12, and 4. And it's part of the idea that numbers aren't just abstract mathematics. They're tied into the structure of the world and the meaning of the world. In the Jewish tradition, there are 7 days of creation, and the week is structured around 7 days. So 7 has a special number for the structure of the world. Just in general, in the ancient world, you could see they thought in terms of 7 planets. They included the moon and the sun as planets, and then there were 5 more that were visually discernible. And so there's 7 planets in the sky. That talks about the structure of the world. There are 12 signs of the zodiac is the structure of time, the year. There are 4 corners. The world has 4 corners, and there are 4 main winds in the world. All of this has to do with the meaning and structure of life, and John plays with those. So 7 is an important number through most of Revelation. It's a basic structuring device. But the 666 is sort of like not really 7. It's the 7. I mean, and you can see him playing off the claims of the empire. The empire is claiming the emperor is a god. We are indestructible. This is the structure of life. And John's little play with the word Nero, Caesar, as 666 is saying, well, not quite. You're not quite 777. It's something like that.
Steve, what's the other mystery here? Is this the mark of the beast? So the dragon, or the dragon puts this mark of the beast onto people. So unless they don't have it, I think it says they can't buy or sell. So, like you said, they're going to die. And I think this is this other mystery which crops up, isn't it, that people are fascinated with. And, as I was saying before, people are saying, well, it's everything from, microchips under the skin is a recent one, vaccine passports, as I was saying, masks even. But I read somewhere that, that there's a theory that it might have been coinage, Roman coinage. And of course, you can't buy or sell without the head of the emperor on the coins. And that goes back to Nero. So have we got any clues as to what this mark of the beast might be on the head and forehead and the hand?
People who study the first century, people who study an historical approach to these questions can't find any really good answer. It doesn't look like John is referring to some actual practice in the ancient world of any kind of marking or anything. It seems more a textual kind of symbol where something is sealed for God or sealed to the beast, and presenting that sort of binary thinking you were talking about earlier. But it has to do with that. Now, this is a great example of what people do with the text. And again, it's not the translation isn't the problem. It's what's really interesting is the interpretation. Everybody works with 666, and throughout history, you come out with different ways of doing this mark. And there are people who have studied sort of popular interpretation, believer interpretation, televangelists, apocalyptic movies over the last 50 years, and the way this mark has shifted, from it, like back in the 70s, it was sort of you'd have an apocalyptic movie and they'd just take a brand and brand it right on your forehead, or on your hand or something like that. Yeah. Or some, a tattoo, something like that. The technology of marking the mark of the beast keeps changing. So then you get, the universal product code has been one thing that lots of interpreters have talked about. There's a 666 built into that universal product code somewhere, and that's the mark of the beast. And then with technology of talking about implanting chips in, instead of having a credit card, you just have a little chip put in your hand, and all kinds of red flags go up. Well, okay, now we got it. Buying and selling, and the mark right there on your hand. That's a clear sign that the end is near.
You can find evidence to support any belief. And I think it's fascinated me with these kinds of, with conspiracy theories and apocalyptic theories, why people, there's nothing magical about these kinds of cults or groups. It's a very similar spectrum to the kinds of group identity you get with, in sport. So, you've got your soccer fans, you've got your baseball fans, you've got your American football fans. Actually what we get from being part of a group is this sense of belonging, a sense of identity. And that goes all the way back to our evolutionary history when our ancient ancestors lived in small, very tight-knit groups on the savannah, and we had to, be part of those groups to survive. To protect ourselves against predators, safety in numbers, all that kind of thing. And to become ostracized from those groups meant certain death in those times. And our brains pretty much have the same wiring now as they did back then. So actually, what we get from groups are absolutely essential to our survival. Always have been, always will be. And we get this sense of belonging when we're in any kind of group. And a sense of group identity. And what we also get is what's called an in-group bias and an out-group bias. So we tend to value members of our own group more highly than we tend to denigrate members of out-groups. And of course, whether it's football, whether it's politics, whether it's religion, you see that, that's the cause of friction across all of those spheres. And the idea, there's also something in psychology called groupthink, which you might have heard of, Steve. And groupthink describes exactly what you were saying. When you've got a group of people, of like-minded people all coming together, and they're all supporting what each other thinks, especially if you've got a powerful leader, and everyone's frightened to question that leader because of all those forces of conformity which operate within groups. And what you get with groupthink is over time, groups becoming more and more extreme in their thinking, because people within the group are very unlikely to challenge the status quo, because we fear that ostracization. So over time, groups start becoming more extreme. So the psychological processes underlying this, I think, are actually quite clearly understood. But it's really interesting to see how it marries up with the theological perspective. It's really, really fascinating.
And I think the point you're both making here is an important one to underline, that religion is not necessarily a good thing. It can be a good thing, but it can also go terribly wrong. It can be an awful thing. And you can march through all sorts of historical examples where that's the case. It's not that religion is good or bad, it's really powerful. And it is able to make humans do things that they would otherwise not do, for better or for worse. Now the question you're raising, Kevin, is an interesting one. What's the difference between a group of religious people and a group of sports fans? Is there a difference? There are certain underlying dynamics that are similar, and this is something we argue about all the time in religious studies. Is sports religion?
So I wondered when we were going to come on to that.
Well, I think the thing with sports, Kevin, that's maybe is different, is that somebody, for example, might say a particular team, like Liverpool, right? Liverpool is like my religion. Somebody might say that, right?
Yeah, and
they would say that as an offhand remark, but for them, it is, as long as they and Liverpool are living in the same kind of orbit. If
Yeah.
Liverpool all suddenly decided to start playing golf instead of soccer,
Yeah.
then he would be really flummoxed by that.
Yeah.
He would he would have nowhere to put his religion.
Yeah.
So he'd have to go and join another religious community, perhaps Manchester United or something else like that, which would gall him terribly. But he'd have no option, you know. But the difference is that you have with the Bible, with the text, you have something that, you know, as a lot of religious cults groups are fond of doing, standing up and thumping their Bible and saying, "This is the word of God." Well, it's the word of God as as I interpret it, you know. And there isn't that with sport.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm going to play devil's, pun totally intended here. I'm going to play devil's advocate on that, because there is another school of thought. What's really interesting, and there's been studies done on this, I'll take your point, by the way, but if you look at what happens sometimes, and I'm sure you've looked at this, Steve, when you look at apocalyptic theories or doomsday prophecies, which have been put out there and haven't come off, right? And you look at what happens when they don't come off. Actually, what you find a lot of the time is people double down on those beliefs. They don't run away and say, well, you know, okay, you know, I must have got that wrong, you know, sorry. What they do is they double down and they say, because so much of their identity is caught up in the belief and being part of that group or the text of whatever they've got that belief from, they don't have the psychological resources to say, well, the text is wrong, the belief is wrong. What they tend to go for is, well, my interpretation of it was wrong. And so therefore there must be something else at work. So actually, Bruce, what you find a lot of the time, and I mean, Steve, you've probably studied this, is if you look at what happens when prophecies go wrong, often, and there was a very famous book written by a social psychologist actually called Leon Festinger back in 1954 called When Prophecies Fail, in which he infiltrated a doomsday cult and it didn't go according to plan, and he wanted to know what would actually happen to the group members. He found that they actually doubled down because they've given up so much to be part of it. They'd given up houses, jobs, relationships, money, everything, and it didn't go right. They thought, well, we can't suddenly all say, well, we got that terribly wrong, we've got to start again. What we've got to do is we've got to come up with another way out. Oh, well, our interpretation of it was wrong. So
that's two things. There's two things there. One is that, I mean, the first observation I make about that is, bizarrely enough, I actually wrote a song about that happening.
Oh, right. Did you?
I actually wrote a song. I think it was called Omega or something, but it starts off and there's a whole lot of people sitting on top of a hill waiting for the world to end. And it goes through what's going to happen. Yeah. And it doesn't happen.
Right.
And it's like, oh. And then at the end of the song, it sort of goes back to the little melancholy bit at the beginning. It goes, oh, well, perhaps again next year then. See you later. You know, and they go back and sit on the hill again the next year, you know, because they can't stand it. But it's the emperor's new clothes.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
I mean, it is the parable of the story of the emperor's new clothes. You know, guys, girls, whoever, you're actually not wearing any clothes. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Of course we are.
I have a course that I teach. It's just a general sort of first year university course called The End of the World as We Know It. And
great.
And great. We talk about Revelation, and then for a couple of weeks, and then the rest of the time we're talking about different apocalyptic groups. And that's one of the things that surprises a lot of students is when a prophecy goes wrong, that is not normally the end of the group. It's a new phase.
It's not the end of the world.
No, it's just the end of the world as we know it.
Exactly.
And what that says to me is there's something going on there that is more important than whether that worked or not, than whether their prophecy is disconfirmed.
Right.
Like one of the famous apocalyptic groups in the last half century in the U.S. was the Branch Davidians, who had a compound outside of Waco, just up Interstate 35 from us, about an hour or two drive. And there was this, famous standoff. It was the beginning of network or cable 24/7 coverage of a standoff. It went on over a month, and finally there's a conflagration, a terrible tragedy, 80 some members of the group died in the fire, women, children, men, and the whole thing went down. There were arrests, and people tend to think, oh, that's it. No, the Branch Davidians are still there. They've rebuilt, and some of them have left, but some of them have rebuilt and said, well, that leader with David Koresh was wrong, or maybe we weren't faithful enough. That's the kind of thing that happens. Even another recent one that my students will sometimes even remember is the May 21, 2011 group, where there was a big international marketing blitz on the world is going to end. I think it was May 21, 2011. And there was one sort of radio Bible teacher who was behind this. His name was Harold Camping. And there's a really good documentary about that a documentarian got access to him, said, you mind if I just follow you around these last couple months and film? And he said, no, it's fine. I don't know why you're going to do it because the world's going to end, but sure, go ahead. And so he filmed him, did interviews with him, talked to him. And, when May 21 came around, we were still here. May 22, everybody was still here. And he did exactly what you were saying, Kevin. He said, oh, yeah, I miscalculated. It's October. That was the spiritual end. And now in October, there's going to be the final end. Yeah. And October came and went, and that still wasn't it. And again, he did what you were saying, Kevin. He said, I was wrong. I was arrogant in my interpretation. But it's never questioning the Bible, which is the foundation of his life, foundation of his network of relationships, his mission in life. And he did not, he continued being a Bible teacher until health reasons came up, but he did not question the authority of the scripture. It's just his interpretations were off. It didn't even cause him to, serious doubt about his belief structure or the fact that he had been on decades on the radio broadcasting across the world about this. It was a good thing. A lot of people heard about Jesus because of it.
Hello folks, we hope you're enjoying Psycho Schizo Espresso. Make sure that you subscribe right now wherever you get your podcast to ensure that you never miss an episode. We'll be releasing episodes every other Tuesday, and you can also get in touch with us at the podcast by emailing pse@podprod.co.uk. Do certain themes come up, Steve, in terms of doomsdays? I mean, I've come across my fair share of floods and fireballs. Are there kind of themes that kind of come up regularly? And I've got to ask you, not being flippant about it, because I don't want to, ride a horse and coach, horse and carriage through people's beliefs. But do you have a favourite failed doomsday prophecy that you've had over the years?
Wow, a favorite one. That's a no. I love them all. All these failed prophecies. I think the Harold Camping example is one interesting one. For one thing, it didn't result in dozens of people dying afterward. Although there were economic repercussions for people who had sold everything and given everything away because they were going to be leaving Earth in a couple weeks. But that one I like because it's at least well documented. It's not doesn't have so much of a group aspect to it. It's weird. It's a part of this new media environment we're in, where one guy in a radio station in the San Francisco Bay Area can get a prophecy going that spreads around the world among certain subgroups. And that's I think with the developments in technology, with the social media and that sort of thing since 2011, that's the wave of the future, or the wave of the end of the future. I don't know, whatever the metaphor is.
I've wondered about that. I was going to ask you about that, actually. I think it seems with social media, I don't know what you think, Bruce, but with social media and the internet over recent years, apocalypses have become much more, or apocalyptic predictions have become much more public. I mean, we've kind of democratized Armageddon a little bit. So if somebody pops up over in, one corner of the world and says the world's going to end in such and such a way, we can all kind of tack on our ruination of choice and kind of read into that, because there's so much, we've got so much access to it now that actually...
Well, it's technology is also starting to replace religion as a form of kind of fundamentalism. First real big example of that for me was the year 2000 Y2K bug, when the world was going to end, and there was a whole slew of people who would have been delighted if it all went horribly wrong, and basically it just didn't. So they all kind of went quiet. But the same mentality of people, I think, probably then resurfaced and went, okay, what else can we believe in that's going to be apocalyptic and that's going to be a catastrophe? And now, of course, with, between, viruses and conspiracy theories and everything else. I mean, I've got a book that somebody gave me, which is just, it's pretty unreadable. But if you open to any page, you'll just go, oh, my goodness me. Okay, right. Okay, next theory. And it's just a compendium of all the crazy theories by somebody who clearly believes in all of them.
Yeah.
And it's extraordinary what's going on. And these are really quite intelligent people. These are not stupid people, but it's nothing to do with intelligence.
Yeah.
It's to do with the way they view the world. And in some way they feel threatened by the world, and so they feel the need to respond by developing theory, joining a group, whatever it is. And the internet makes it really easy for them to compartmentalize themselves. And I mean, this one chap, for example, he was talking to me and saying, he said, I've got lots of secret information. I went, oh, okay. Good, And he goes, oh, no. He said they take it all down from the internet, but I record it all before they can take it down, and then I disseminate it to all my mates, and they do the same thing to him. So there's this closed circle of people.
Yeah.
So when people put untrue facts on the internet, and extremely rare, I would imagine, that they actually get taken down. They don't get taken down. They get disseminated and passed around.
Well, it comes back to what we were saying, Bruce. I mean, studies have been done looking at personality types of people that are more likely to believe in conspiracy theories and doomsday prophecies. And they tend to be people that have low self-esteem, people who feel powerless. So this kind of idea of secret knowledge really appeals to them. They've got something to make them feel powerful, to enhance their self-esteem. But there's also this idea that they've got a strong doomsday prophecies. I don't know how you feel about this, Steve. Doomsday prophecies and this kind of thing, they kind of also answer our need for certainty as well. So one of the things which we're very bad at navigating as human beings is uncertainty. There was a very famous study done a few years ago where people were given a choice about receiving electric shocks. So they were given a choice. You can either receive an electric shock now, or you can wait and receive one at some random time, or perhaps not at all. And the majority of people chose to have it now, rather than wait to have it at some random time and possibly not at all, because that uncertainty, even though it might have been mitigated by not having it, was actually, it was outweighed the certainty of having it now. That seemed a far better prospect. We'll just get it over and done with. We'll have the certainty and we'll get it over and done with. So that idea of certainty, I think, is perhaps, I don't know what you think about that, Steve, is I think, that's one of the things that I think, apocalyptic kind of theories and doomsday prophecies actually answers. And I think that's one of the things we get out of it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the classic explanations for apocalypticism, for an apocalyptic worldview, is that it provides certainty in a world of anxiety. And that's got, in my opinion, there isn't one thing going on there isn't one thing that explains all of them. There are a lot of different factors, and I think we've hit on several of them here. But in the new media environment, I think what's interesting and also scary is the role of gatekeepers has changed. And like 75 years ago, if there's an apocalyptic prophet who has a vision and thinks the world's going to end, it's kind of hard for him to find the other people who would go along with that. It's a little bit harder. Sometimes they managed. Yeah. Now it's really easy to find 50 other people who will at least go along with you online. And it's not an elimination of gatekeepers. I mean, there's still all kinds of factors, economic factors at work, social media, the level of control or surveillance they put on it. There are all kinds of things going on like that. But the amount of control, what I'm calling gatekeepers, has gone down. And so you can organize all kinds of strange things. And you get examples like, I think one interesting one is the development of QAnon over the last, less than a decade, of a mysterious, it's an apocalyptic idea. I don't know if you can call it a group yet, and it has
it's a kind of loose seems to be like a loose association of people who all have peripheral thinking around a certain sort of milieu of ideas.
It's a new media group, or it's a new kind of group that's made possible by the kinds of technology that are now available. And so they what to many people seems like craziness, that Donald Trump was fighting a deep state conspiracy run by pedophile Satanists, is taken seriously by a certain group, and it is developed enough center of gravity that it's affecting national politics at the center of the most powerful imperial force in the world at this point, America. And it's fascinating the way these apocalyptic patterns have reshaped themselves, and this desire for certainty, or desire to, finding people who can confirm your bias, it's taken on a whole new dynamic with the advent of digital media. And whether we can survive that is a whole other question. I mean, it's fascinating, but it's also scary.
Do you know what, Steve? You just came up with I don't know if you meant to do it. You came up with a brilliant collective noun for gatekeepers there, and an illumination of gatekeepers. I thought it's a great collective.
The alumni.
Yeah, the alumni.
But not Illuminati. No,
not the Illuminati. Steve, can I just ask you one question about this idea of apocalypticism? Do you think that there's something occurred to me? Do you think that we're all on a kind of a spectrum, a kind of a doomsday spectrum? So on the one hand, you've got your crazy firebrand, fireball, doomsday cultists who predict the end of the world next year or whatever. But then on the other end of it, you've got kind of, I guess, what you might call normal people, fans of Terminator, Mad Max, Cormac McCarthy's book, The Road. And it all comes back to what you said right at the beginning, doesn't it? That the book of Revelation written by John the Divine is a great story. And I think we've kind of gone full circle. I mean, is it about the story? Is that what this is all about? And actually, there's a spectrum. And we're all on it to some extent. Some of us are going to go the firebrand, fireball route, and it's going to end next year. But, actually, we all like to play with this idea of, the world ending someday in some fashion. And we get our kicks, in that regard from film and literature.
Mm-hmm. I think that, as I've said before, Revelation has a lot of stuff in it, and it goes in lots of different directions. It's confusing, and it allows us to take it in different directions, so that a lot of those things you're talking about, those different desires that readers have, can find a place in Revelation. And you could talk about that as being on a spectrum. Part of Revelation is full of vengeance. And a desire for revenge. The oppressive beast is going to be cast into the lake of fire and burn eternally and suffer.
That's Nero Caesar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also, and people often forget this, at the end of the book, there are these beautiful visions of utopia, of every tear being wiped away. Sin and death are no longer. God dwells among God's people. There's this reunification in the tree of life from the Garden of Eden makes a reappearance, but now it gives fruit every month. It has 12 different harvests every month, and its leaves are for the healing of nations. That vision of restoration and healing is also there. And so this book can, because it does so many things, it can find a hearing with all kinds of people, all kinds of groups, and speak to them at a level that many texts do not.
It's kind of like if it was a painting, it would be an abstract expressionist painting that you can read anything into it depending on what you want.
Well, but at the end of it's quite specific then,
Well, that's true.
So it's interesting that part of the Book of Revelations doesn't really get much of a run in popular culture. Everybody is always having the cult about the doom at the end of the world. And the other thing that's interesting, we just on this whole thing about the way the internet has empowered gatekeepers to go and create their own cults. A lot of these cults, it seems, or opinion groups or focus groups, whatever you choose to call them, they might be taking inspiration from something like Revelations, but they're not taking they're not taking their literality from it. They're actually creating their own little system, which may very well be based on technology. There's politics. There's a New World Order conspiracy. There's this conspiracy. There's the paedophile conspiracy. There's the fact that there are too many helicopters flying conspiracy. There's the 5G phone mast conspiracy that we're all unerringly attracted to now we've had the vaccine. All those kind of crazy things. But people are substituting. Like a kind of a menu, you can go down it used to be you could go into the cafeteria and you'd have you can have a choice of 4 dishes. That's it. Well, now the internet has given us a choice of several hundred things on the menu, and not all of them are beef and potatoes,
Just along those lines, Bruce, I'm looking forward to you writing a heavy metal song about the New Jerusalem. Or do you have one already?
William Blake already did that.
Oh, but I'd like to hear your rendition. Anyway, the Book of Revelation is just nobody takes it seriously.
Yeah.
Or let me say, nobody takes Revelation literally. If you take Revelation literally, you become a martyr, because it basically says, no compromise. Come out from this evil system. You can't buy or sell if you don't have the mark of the beast. That's it. You're destined for God's kingdom.
Yeah.
And that all kinds of people, all kinds of groups find that inspiring, but you can't take it literally and survive very long, I think.
So just like the book of Genesis, I suppose, Steve. The first book of the Bible, you can't really take that literally and survive for too long. Same as Book of Revelation. So the kind of the first and the last books of the Bible are probably, the same in that respect. Which brings me to a question I wanted to ask. I mean, you talked about the canon of the Bible existing, and it was set, roughly started coming around in the 4th century, around 360, something like that. I mean, are people still arguing about it now? Is that it? Is the Bible set in stone as it is, New and Old Testament? Or is there a chance that in some, years to come, someone might win an argument to say, well, actually, there's another ancient book. I mean, there's the Gospel of Thomas, isn't there? There's Philip. Is it set in stone, or is there room for another one? The
Christian churches don't all agree on the Bible as it is. I mean, Protestants, conservative Protestants have a real stripped down one. You got the Old Testament, you got the New Testament. Some Protestants, Catholics have the Apocrypha, which is a group of texts in between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And then there are other churches that add a couple Psalms or add, like the Ethiopian church has the book of First Enoch, another very large apocalyptic text. So there are different groups that have different canons of Scripture. Whether anybody could add one at this point, well, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints added their own. They've got an expanded canon. But it tends to be, I mean, right now, the big church groups have so much invested in the canon as it is, it would be really hard to change that. But you can still read other texts.
Mormonism is kind of interesting because, I mean, you've got Mormonism and then you've got something which is not based on the Bible, but is definitely a cult, something like Scientology, which is effectively based, it's groupthink, but based on, it's kind of an apocalyptic cult. It has I think, Scientology, does it have an end time, Scientology? Anybody know much about Scientology?
I don't know much about it. And I tell my students, anything after about the 4th century, I'm kind of fuzzy on.
Yeah. But Scientology is definitely a kind of religion, a kind of group thing that has no real basis with their funny little machines that measure whatever they measure. I mean, for all I know, they might be measuring your body fat ratio. But that has proved incredibly successful, and that's kind of tech based, and that actually has the allegedly otherworldly beginning. It came down from aliens. And this, alien abductions, all these kind of things. Very similar things. They all go back allegedly. They base their stuff. A lot of these alien abduction belief systems on the book of Ezekiel. Do you remember there was Eric von Daniken?
The Chariot of the Gods, isn't it?
The Chariot of the Gods, largely discredited, guy that people still believe in, and he's kicked off the whole thing, and there are lots of things. I read a book called The Chariots of Ezekiel, in which somebody had interpreted the book of Ezekiel as actually being somebody that witnessed a spacecraft landing, and that's what they were describing. If you want to believe that, then great. For all I know, the book of Revelations, you could do the same thing,
In terms of adding another book to the canon, I think that's pretty unlikely in the mainstream groups. But what you do see going on in almost all Christian groups is they select within the canon the things that are important. There are some churches that focus on Revelation and a particular interpretation of Revelation and go from there. Most Protestant churches tend to focus more on Paul and his letters. There are other churches that say, well, we're not so sure about Paul, but, they don't say that, but they kind of focus on the Gospels. They like Jesus and talking about the stories of Jesus and that sort of thing. So there's always a selection going on within the canon that, the canon has, the Bible has so many different stories and says so many different things. That's the genius of a Bible, is it doesn't all say the same thing.
What first got you interested in the book of Revelation then? So obviously, that's your academic discipline, Revelation in the context of the history of the church. What was it that particularly grabbed you about that age of research?
I think
all those years ago, I would imagine.
Yeah. Part of it is sort of deep psychology, and part of it is just accidental. I grew up in a pastor's family. My dad was a pastor, and it was in a church, in one of the Mennonite churches, not the ones that drive buggies, but one of the Mennonite churches that look kind of like Baptists if you see one on the street. In the Mennonite tradition, there's a strong emphasis on purity, on commitment, on being true to your faith, even though the world doesn't agree with you. And that kind of resonates with the book of Revelation, I think. And so there's kind of a deep theological background that I have that makes me interested in Revelation. But the way I actually got interested in or got involved in research was in my first graduate seminar in doctoral studies at Harvard. It just happened to be a seminar on Revelation, and the way that seminar worked is you got together at the beginning of the semester, everybody took a chapter, you went off and started writing, and in a couple of weeks, people started presenting their papers in the seminar. And my first semester in doctoral studies, I did a paper on Revelation, and I just never got free of it. And that's a cautionary tale to all you out there. Once you get involved in Revelation, it gets its fingers into you, and you never finish with it.
It's just dawned on me, Bruce. I don't know if you know, Steve, that Bruce flies planes, as well as sings in a rock band.
Apropos of what, Kevin, is this?
Didn't you had an airline, or you flew? Was it Flight 666?
No, I had a job. I worked as a skipper flying a 757. Yeah.
That was
Wow.
it, yeah. And I dug up an interesting fact. You might know this. I thought I'd get this in before we finish. There was, in October 2017, Flight AY 666, have you heard this? Which went from Copenhagen to Helsinki, made its last flight before it changed to AY 954. Because people were just freaked out by flying on a Flight 666. And apparently in those years, since 2006 to 2017, it had been scheduled on Friday the 13th 21 times.
Hilarious.
There you go. So it is.
Fantastic.
But you had no problem flying on Flight 666, did you?
No, when we had some charter flights that we did, actually going to Iron Maiden shows when I was working at the airline. And we went round the world 3 times on a 757, which we modified for a sort of semi-cargo operation. So we had all the band and the crew and the equipment on it going around the world.
Yeah.
And all of those flights, every flight was, the flight code was AEU 666, because that was our particular airline code. So everyone was Flight 666. And all the air traffic controller guys all over the world knew it. So they would refer to us as if we had lots of fans who were air traffic controllers, it turned out.
Wow.
So they would call us various names like, hey, is that the number of the beast? Or, Iron Maiden 666, to get all kinds of different names. But yeah, 666, when we did the Number of the Beast album, we put out a couple of stories which, they were sort of spoof stories about the recording of it. One was that the studio was haunted, and that there were strange noises that were heard when Steve, the bass player who wrote the song, there were strange noises heard when he was playing the bass guitar, and we couldn't identify what they were. And actually, that was partially true. I'll get you to tell you why in a minute. But the other one, which was actually true, was that our producer Martin Birch went out of his driveway into the road, and he was driving his Range Rover, and he piled straight into the back of a van load of nuns. Wow. And nobody was hurt, but he took the car to the garage and they fixed it, and he got the bill back. And guess how much was the bill?
No.
It was.
No, it wasn't.
Was.
It was
£666. No, it was £666. And he showed us the bill, and it was true.
I bet it was 665, and he rounded it up.
No, it was true. It was true because we were already halfway through the album at the time when he got the bill. That was the thing. He couldn't have faked it. But the story about the weird haunting on the bass guitar track was all solved when they were trying to find out where the hell is that weird noise coming from, and they soloed all the individual microphones. There was a mic that was in front of the speaker cabinet, and that sounded all right. And then there was another one that was the direct injection that was actually just the electric signal from the back of the amplifier, and that was kind of okay, but there was still this funny noise. So finally, they soloed the little microphone that just hangs from the ceiling that enables the guy who's playing the bass in the little booth to talk back to the studio. The talkback mic that just dangles there.
Yeah.
And they soloed that, which normally doesn't get recorded, but actually it kind of gets recorded peripherally from the noise it's making. And they discovered that Steve basically was doing this kind of strange tribal chanting thing with his headphones on, didn't realise he was doing it. So as he was playing the bass, he was also going, and this was all going down as his funny, like, what's that weird noise? That's weird moaning in the background. And people went, oh, yeah, it's haunted, isn't it? It went, oh, yeah, good story.
Comes back to you, read into it what you want, right? There you go.
Absolutely.
It's just reading into it what you want.
Confirmation bias.
I hope you left it in the recording.
Oh, yes, absolutely. There was no way around it. It was all on tape. And that was the old days of 2-inch tape. So it was all on there. And we had all kinds of people, blessing us before we went on stage, at places. I had guys with like a 20-foot crosses with a tail wheel. So they could put them on, and Jesus never had a tail wheel, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But these guys had tail wheels, so they could walk around the cross in some comfort, and they were circling the building in their crosses and things like that. Yeah. This is back in the very beginning in the 80s. Irony is very misunderstood.
Well, listen, Steve, I'll keep you posted. If Maiden are playing in anywhere near you, right? I'll have a chat with Bruce. We'll get a ticket. There's got to be a dedication, Bruce. Number of the Beast for Steve Friesen. He's in the crowd somewhere. He helped us out.
That would be wonderful. That would be the pinnacle of my academic career right there.
You certainly did help us out,
pinnacle
Steve.
of my academic career, that's for sure.
It really has been wonderful, and mine as well. We've really thoroughly enjoyed it. It really has been absolute really fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a fun conversation. Appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, we got the answer, Nero. So there you go, Bruce. We finally know.
Next time I go to the chain of coffee shops, Cafe Nero, I'll order a 666 espresso. Well, there you go. Kevin, that was Steve. Everybody, thank you for listening. Thanks, Steve Friesen, for an incredibly erudite exposition of everything 666. Everything to do with the apocalypse, to do all the various cults and things around that. Of course, that was unusual for us, wasn't it, Kev? Because most of our episodes are going to be just single shots, as it were. But Steve was so good, we thought we would make 2 out of that one. So that was the thing there. But of course, we're now kind of established. People, I hope, are listening. Thank you all for listening. Really, really cool. Next up is going to be me.
Yours truly, isn't it, Bruce? It's going to be
Am I a psychopath?
And I would, well, do you know what? I would also, folks, if that's not too much for you, please subscribe now. So make sure that you never miss an episode by doing that.
Yes, absolutely.
We'll be releasing episodes every other Tuesday. Do you know what, Bruce? I think there's a delicious irony in the fact that we finally discovered that the number of the beast, 666, refers to Nero, who, of course, went on to give his name to a very successful franchise of coffee houses.
Certainly did, yes.
All across the UK, US and the rest of the world. So I think that's a delicious irony.
It is a delicious irony, and by chance, I think I'm 6 shots away from a free one, you know what I mean? So.
Well, you can see what we're doing here, folks. But no, it was a wonderful chat.
Don't even get paid by Cafe Nero. No. People think this is sponsored by somebody, don't they? I mean, I don't know.
Other brands are available.
We don't get sponsored by anybody because we're just having a laugh, But good fun.
But listen, after we've discovered that Emperor Nero was a psychopath, what we're going to do in episode 3, Bruce, is we're going to find out if you're one. And that is going to be fascinating for me. So, and I'm sure fascinating for all your fans and our listeners. Anyway, folks, let's see what episode 3 brings. Is Bruce Dickinson a psychopath?
Psycho Schizo Espresso was a pod production. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you want to contact us, pse@podprod.co.uk or #Psycho Schizo Espresso.